When completing the preliminary task, it was approached in a completely different manner to our final film opening, which was marked and was given a lot more time and effort. Carrying out the preliminary task, we did not carry out any research into what would be expected. Instead, we used our limited previous knowledge from when we had carried out the 3 film tasks and put them together in one long product. These tasks include filming continuous shots of a hand pushing and opening a door, a person walking across a room, and a conversation. In contrast, in our film opening, we were much more organised in what we were going to shoot due to the extensive planning we had done. It meant that we were able to plan out when the best time to film would be and how long we had left to edit the task, as we didn't plan out how much time we had left and what we was going to shoot in our film opening. One way we did this was by creating a storyboard. This was helpful as it meant we were able to see what shots we were going to do and what the sequence would look like visually. The reason we chose to do this instead of an animatic was due to the lengthy process of creating a video to show stills. This would involve going to the location and taking images rather than filming, which would be a lot more time consuming than going there twice to film. With the storyboard, it meant we could be more creative and adapt what we were going to do, as we have the knowledge of the location and our characters in our minds. Should we have used an animatic, we would be limited to the amount of pictures we took and would have had to know what we were going to put in anyways. Therefore, creating a storyboard in my mind was easier than creating an animatic. Another difference between the preliminary task and my final film opening was the organisation between our product and our actors. Firstly, we created a production schedule. This showed us the deadlines as to when the film would be completed and edited. In the preliminary task, we used the actors who were in our group. This was good as it meant that the preliminary task did not take up as much task time and therefore we would have more time to adapt to what we were going to put in our final film product. Next, we did a weekly production schedule. This shows us how we are progressing and an outlook on what needs to be done in the next lesson. It also enables us to look back and see if we are making progress as we should be. Another thing we did, which was different to our preliminary task, was by creating a shot list. This enabled us to create the best order to shoot and ensure we did not miss any shots out. This was helpful as it meant we spent less time when we were there planning out what order to film our shots in when we had already put the knowledge from our storyboard into a shot list. Finally, we created a call list. This enabled us to look at our actors and our talent and find out which shoot they were going to be in and what times we were going to film. This was extremely helpful to us as it meant that as soon as we got to our location, we knew when we were going to film, what times we were going to film, and who was going to be in each shot. As opposed to when we were there, we would have to, if we did not have a call list, plan out what time would be best and make sure our talent was there on the day. As we were working in a group, we both had 2 cameras to film our film opening. We also used 2 tripods. In our preliminary task, we just used the standard college camera. This made it easier to film as we had 2 different angles for each shot that we had. Although we had 2 tripods in our film opening, we decided to use one handheld as it meant that we were able to enhance the different shots and include some which contained movement. Therefore, not all of our shots were still and the film opening did not look boring. When carrying out our film opening, we had a lot more knowledge and understanding of the conventions of horror film openings. We used a lot more advanced editing software, for example, Premiere Pro, which allowed us to edit precisely the videos with different tools, whereas in our preliminary task, we used iMovie. It also allowed us to include the Photoshop files and other Adobe software. For example, the classification screen and our company logo. In Premiere Pro, we were also able to add special effects to our film opening to make it conform to the horror genre more, and if it did not look as good on the footage, we were able to edit it and enhance it so it looked as professional as possible. One of the ways we used special effects and Premiere Pro software was by using the colour corrections and tinting of videos. We used this when creating our flashback scenes to show the audience a clear difference between what was real life and what the actor was dreaming. We were able to mix diegetic and non-diegetic sound in Premiere Pro professionally so that it did not sound rough and it was as smooth as possible. In our preliminary task, we used iMovie. It was basic and simple and we did not do much editing to our footage. We put it all together and it was all done for us. We had no research carried out other than the previous 3 tasks that we did, and there was not much planning other than what dialogue was going to be said in the conversation and who was going to be in whose film. There was a lack of effects in our preliminary task, and it was very simple. And another thing that we did differently in our preliminary task was by choosing a basic soundtrack which we found online. We did not spend a lot of time looking at different soundtracks. We just found one which we thought would suit our preliminary task and put it in. On the other hand, in our film opening, we used a much more advanced software, Premiere Pro. We carried out extensive research into conventions of a film opening in my chosen genre, horror. This research then carried on to planning for my opening. We cast actors, and although when one actor backed down for halfway through creating our film opening, we were able to quickly find another one who fit in with our plot. Sound effects and soundtrack was also completely different in Premiere Pro, as we spent a lot more time going through different websites and even creating our own by editing the soundtrack for it to fit into our film opening, instead of just dragging it in and leaving it and letting it be. We also edited it through Premiere Pro and placed in footage from After Effects using a range of different techniques that we found in online tutorials. This was extremely helpful as it meant our footage looked more professional and it was more conformed to the horror genre. The colour correction tool was one of our biggest uses of Premiere Pro, as it meant that we could change our colours to a more blue tint to make it stand out more as a flashback instead of fitting in with the rest of the film opening. From a footage point of view, when we were creating our final film opening, we already had the knowledge of what we had gone wrong in our preliminary tasks. For example, a lack of different angles and unsteady, unprofessional angles. Through research, we looked at a lot of different film openings in our horror genre and therefore knew what we would expect with the different angles and how we could improve on them from our preliminary task. We also made sure that we did not cross the 180-degree rule, even though it was a lot harder having 2 cameras as we were continuously filming from 2 different points of views. However, we were able to create much more sophisticated shots with this, such as the jump cut. Lighting was also completely different in our final film opening, as when we planned out for our shot list what time of day we were going to shoot and with our call list, we were able to check that our footage was not too dark, and if it was, we could edit it in Premiere Pro or go back to the location and refilm parts. With sound, we did not really include any diegetic sound because we knew we were faced with the problem of it being too quiet or not clear enough. Therefore, when we did it through a microphone separately in the studio, and it was a lot more louder and clear, and we were able to drag it over the top of our footage and make it sound more realistic. Overall, looking back at my preliminary task, I feel like I've learned a lot through media and the different techniques that was needed to use in the main task. I was able to see different angles through research, and the research helped me a lot in looking back and conforming to the horror genre, in which we did not need to do in the preliminary task. I was also able to use a much more advanced and learn through tutorials a much more advanced editing software such as Premiere Pro rather than the slightly basic iMovie. I feel like I've come a long way from my preliminary tasks, and I feel like this is shown through my film opening.